Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you the top 5 best player damage builds in Palworld's 1.0 update. The best thing about this is it's actually on normal world settings and you can do some insane amounts of damage like you're seeing here. We can do multiple different elemental setups and you hit some insanely high damage numbers here. So we'll be breaking down all of that in this video. And the best part about this is it has multiple different elements, so depending on what you prefer, I'll be showing you the best builds for all those. And the team synergy that you just saw there was Hellzephyr Lux, which turns our attack types into electric and increases them. Ophidia, which applies Soak, which will double the electric damage that we deal. Tide, which is going to increase the damage dealt to enemies that are afflicted with Soak by 65%. Solen, very powerful, increases our damage by 80% when all pals are different. And Cryolink's Terra, which increases our enemy weak point damage by 60% on the next one after hitting a weak point, which is very easy to stack up. It's honestly very generous. I want to quickly dispel a rumor, a myth that I've been getting a lot in my comments. So using Solen here increases your attack by 80% if all parties are different species. Gobfin and Gobfin Ignis are actually different species. You can confirm this by checking. We have 150% pal skill effect there boost. If we were to remove one, you see we still have that bonus effect there in place. But for a brief overview, we're actually breaking this down into elemental damage types as there's a lot of synergies between the different pals here, but there's a few that actually can fit in depending on the weapons that you like, and 3 that I would recommend on every single build in this game. Solen, obviously being the new most powerful pal, so you don't have to stack Gobfin. This will increase your attack by 80%. Now, Vanworm Christ. If you have a regular Vanworm, it's still okay, it's a 40% boost, but the 50% damage boost to enemy weak points is insanely powerful. This will stack up with Cryolink's Terra, which increases the attack power by 60%. So in a vacuum, this one is better, but you can actually run both of these to maximize your own damage, especially if it's an enemy with a large weak point, like the new raid boss is there that has a big crystal on its head that you can shoot at easily. So you can honestly fit all 3 of these onto any builds, but I want to talk about some other pals, like for example, Robinquill and Robinquill Terra here. Since the partner skill is different and they do different effects here, this increases bow damage by 35%. The best single target damage weapon in the game is the mechanical bow. So this works really well when you combine the bow charge speed and the bow damage if you want to focus on bows. In addition, we can also throw in Lumen, which will make the player's arrows explode on contact, dealing 30% of the damage. This will hit the same target, but it's great if you're fighting multiple pals at a time. I also want to quickly mention Hoodle, which will increase the damage those that are not in combat by 100%. This is actually pretty crazy because some pals take a while to get into combat, so you can actually get a few attacks off before this will end up getting affected. This is great for farming things like Mimog if you want to just one-shot them as easily as possible. I also did mention just briefly Gobfin. You can stack these earlier in the game. Now, Lavander and Felbat here will give you lifesteal. These are really good on some of the harder bosses. You can toss them out and sustain yourself a bit easier with those, so I just want to quickly give them a mention. Now, if you want to use shotguns, Nyafia here just gives you increased shotgun damage and will shoot off a shotgun themselves. And Xenoguard will increase your enemy energy weapon damage by 35%. So again, depending if you want to use bows, energy weapons, shotguns, you're going to build around these. Not that defense is super useful, but Sylvagus here will increase the shield or reduce the shield regen rate by 60% and increase the amount of damage that you can take by 80%, or reduce the damage taken by 80%. So these are just ones that you can fit onto any of these builds here if you want to, let's say, focus on bows, focus on shotguns, etc. Now, the best passive skills to boost up the player, number 1, Vanguard. Increases the attack power by 10%. If you have 5 pals with that, that's a 50% damage increase, which is huge. I also like to have Reload Master. It's only a 4% increase to reload speed, but on certain weapons, that's actually really good. Stronghold Strategist will give you a 10% increase to the player's defense, which is also quite nice to have. And Idiosyncratic, which will give you auto health regenerate, 50% increase to the boost, 25% increase to their defense, and then you get immune to poison and burn damage. But Vanguard's the only really essential one, so that's the one to look out for. And typically on your mount, you want to have the movement speed-based passive skills. And now that's out of the way, one of the most powerful builds in my opinion, and for the hardest boss fight in the game, the easiest way to go about dealing with it is to use one of these 3 here. Hellzephyr Lux is a flyable mount, which means you can shoot off its back. It turns your damage type into electric. This is huge. So this is our first team, the electric focus team. It's one of the best elements in this game. Earlier on, you can use Beacon, which also has the same effect of turning your damage into electric, and this will also increase the pal's movement speed per every electric pal that you have. Amazing. I like both of these pals. You get the boost in speed with Beacon. Hellzephyr Lux is just naturally faster. And you can see their attack numbers there. I'm using like full strength ones here at level 4, but I haven't had them awaken just to show what they're like at base here. So I also would recommend, if you don't want to fly around, Prickster Lux, which will increase your damage by 50% and change your type to electric. So much stronger than the birds, but it's at the downside, you have to have this pal out. You cannot ride them. Now, where electric gets really powerful is there's a lot of pals that'll actually buff this up. I already mentioned a couple, but I want to quickly talk about Snock here. Well, in the party, the player's attacks will inflict Electrify 6. Now, this is actually interesting because it increases the damage taken by water types by two times it. So you can run Azarobe here, which will turn your attack types into water, which is a nice combination here if you wanted to like put this together, because this just has to be in your party to apply Electrify, but it can fit on the electric builds as well. Now, the best thing about Snock is you can also run a little bit further and grab yourself a Slowwatt, which will discharge electricity whenever you attack someone that is affected by Electrify, which will do 60% of the damage to nearby enemies, making it one of the best mobbing builds in the game. If you have multiple enemies that are base defense, for example, you just blow them up with this combination here. So the thing is, like, you can pair these all together, and it's kind of funny because you can swap around, and actually these kind of go synergetic with each other here. So the electric team prefers typically to have the Ophidia there to apply Soaked, which increases the electric damage, and then Yormantide, which increases the damage dealt to those with Soaked by 65%. So you can run with, again, a team of something like this here, and then swap in either Van Christ or Crowling's Terra, and this is a very powerful team because we're doing electric damage. Soak will boost up our electric damage dealt while also increasing the damage dealt by 65%. Our player damage is increased by 80%, and then our critical hit damage is increased by 60%. So very synergetic. I'm kind of doing a 2-for-1 here because we can roll with like this combination here and instead have a water type damage from Azarobe and then apply Electrify, boost up the Electrify damage, and then do a 60% explosion around the target. And then also, again, have Solen there and Crowling's Terra for the increased damage. It just felt right to combine the water and electricity here just because they are so similar and synergetic to each other. So yeah, it's a top 5, but a little extra value in this video. I also do want to quickly mention Neptilius here, which, well, in the party, follow-ups the attacks with a water sphere attack here. This is the fastest water as well, so if you want to go around farming for like water things, you can go with Electrify and blow those up really well. And this doesn't turn your damage into water type, unfortunately. I also quickly mention Dazzy. Whenever it's in your party, it's going to shoot off electric bolts. Now, this doesn't do a lot of damage, but it's another choice if you want to add something else onto the team. So yeah, the water with Electrify team would be Azarobe, Slowwatt, Snock, Solen, and Crowling's Terra. The electric with water would be Helzephyr Lux, Ophidia, Yormantide, Solen, and Crowling's Terra. Next up, I want to talk about dark teams because there are some very interesting ones. I love dark type pals. Now, there's actually a lot of cool synergies here. Frostalion Noct, one of my favorite pals in the game, will change your attack type to dark, inflict blind 6, and increase attack power by 40%. Now, the reason that this is really crazy is because we also can throw in Rouge here. So, Rouge Dunna. Whenever you have this in your party, it increases the damage dealt to those that are inflicted with blind by 65%. So, we got a 40% damage boost, we get a 65% damage boost, pretty crazy. A little bit earlier, you can just grab Helzephyr, so that is also kind of similar to the last strategy. It turns our attack types to dark, but if you're going to do it, Frostalion Noct is just way better. There's also Wixen Noct, which will turn your damage type to 50% increase, which is cool too, but again, having blind and then also having Rouge is so crazy powerful. Now, we also have things like Crogiro Noct, which improves the player and pal's dark damage to enemy weak points by 40%. Now, this is crazy because you can throw this on and you can go all in on critical hit damage, and you're getting a boost from the blindness here. This just naturally applies to statuses. And again, Solen is typically going to be included in all player damage builds. It's hard to beat 80% extra damage, but again, you can, if you want to, you can just sacrifice that for 50% increased damage with Vanmer and Chris. But there's other combinations we can throw on here, like Dazzy Noct, which will shoot off dark bolts, which again, not super powerful, but it's another extra way of getting damage. And there's also Shadowbeak. I love Shadowbeak. Has a really cool skin. You can go with that as well, but honestly, it's hard to beat the Frostalion Noct, Rouge, Crogiro Noct, Solen, and Crowling's Terra. These two kind of fit every single build as I mentioned. If you want to maximize your dark damage, this would be the way to go. Now, this is a little bit different than pal damage, where Eidrolon comes in handy, and I will be doing pal damage builds in the future, so you can subscribe to stay tuned for that. But I just love this setup. It is insanely powerful. Now, I'm going to quickly mention a poison type build. Now, poison is not a type in Palworld. However, you can build around it thanks to the new pal Dandylord. When activated, the player's attacks will inflict poison. It also makes you immune to poison. Now, poison's interesting because Poison is the only condition that can actually stack with others, so you can actually mix and match and throw an Electrify onto this as well if you wanted to, or Soaked, making it a very interesting one. But we also have Bakemi here. While attacking enemies afflicted with poison reduces their attack by 80%. This makes you very bulky, and it also will double stack up if you're going to throw on Sylvestius. So if you want to be the most defensive possible build, poison them with Dandylord, throw on Bakemi, and then we're also going to throw on Prickster, which increases the player and pal's damage to enemies afflicted by poison by 65%. So this is actually a very powerful build as well, because we can just have Dandylord out, who has some of the coolest animations in the game, applying poison, which deals damage over time. Bakemi will give us that defense boost, Prickster further boosting up our damage. And then if you're playing with friends, for example, you can throw on like Ophidia, or you can throw on Snock there to apply extra statuses, which just brings us up a whole other level. You'd swap out Bakemi, but they have a really nice benefit. So yeah, I think poison teams are actually very cool, and not something that you typically would be running because there's no poison type, but it is a actually viable option if you wanted to roll with it. Next up, we got a fire team. I think it's a really cool one because Chillet is one of my favorites. Chillet Ignis will change your attack type to fire and increase the attack by 20%. It's also very fast and a great mount. I love Chillet, so you should too. But we could also run with Wixen here, which will change your attack type to fire and increase the attack by 50%, which is great. And then we also have Ragnahawk, which kind of fills a role of like Beacon there with the fire type changing of attacks, and it is roughly around like the same attack power. But I just love Chilled so much that that's the one that I typically run despite having lower stats. I just like him. But similarly, Yormantide Ignis here, which will nullify lava damage, increases the player's attack to those that are burned. We can get burned with new Renjishi here, which when in the party, players' attacks will like burn. Now, this is pretty crazy because of all the pals that actually interact with burn. So we also have Magix here. So while the party player attacks someone that's afflicted with burn, it creates flames around itself, dealing continuous damage equal to 30% of the player's attack damage to enemies that come in contact with them. So giving yourself a bit of a flame shield. And Floracle, which whenever you attack a target that's afflicted with burn, it'll explode them, dealing damage equal to 60% of the player's attack damage to nearby enemies. So again, another one that's great for mobbing. Now, fire, whenever a target's burned, they take half damage from grass types. So don't have your teammate do that. So that is an interesting setup. What we can do for this setup here, you don't have, like, if you really want to maximize damage, is probably going with Wixen here, who has the highest attack out of the 3 fire boosters. It's not like a super high attack, but it's something. Yormantide Ignis, which will give you that increased burn damage by 65%. Inflict burn with Renjishi. You can sub in Magix, but it's way higher with Solan and Crowling's Terra. This will do a big explosion, or give you a shield, and this one will do the explosion. So if you're mobbing, these two, Floracle and Magix, are the best choice for this. But if you're doing single target bossing, it's better to go Solan and Crowling's Terra. But this is the burn setup here if you want to go fire. I just prefer Chillet Ignis. Now next I'm going to talk about a grass team, but fire actually is really nice on a grass team, and I'll explain why. It's a weird combination, but with grass we have Elgrove here, which will change your attack type to grass, increasing it by 50%, or Quiver Botan, which will also change it to grass. I love Quiver, super cute, and increase the damage by 20%. Obviously this is a lot more damaging, but it's between these two. They have the exact same attack stat, which is kind of funny, so pick your poison. This one will give you more damage. Now, what's great about the grass is it has its own condition here, but the condition actually buffs up fire damage. So this will make fire damages deal twice as much damage. It'll slow them down. The ivy covered here. The only downside is grass and fire types are immune to this condition, so it's actually quite a few. But when in your party with Nidal knocked, it'll apply Ivy Covered 6, and then also Nidal here will increase the damage dealt to Ivy Covered by 65%. So actually a funny combination would be to go with Chillet Ignis, who does fire damage, Ivy Covered, which doubles fire damage, and then Nidal, which will give you extra damage to Ivy Covered, which is amazing. And then we can also throw in Sylvan. So when you attack a target that has the Ivy Covered, the enemy explodes, dealing additional damage equal to 60% of the player's attack damage. So you can sub this in, but again, Solan and Crowling's Terra are just so good to throw on there. So you can roll with a setup like this if you wanted to, because we're dealing double damage with fire. So this is actually an interesting setup. You're actually incentivized when using a grass team to use a fire like player damage boost, just because of the crazy amounts of damage. So if you really wanted to min-max your grass team, it'd be Wixen, Nidal Knock, Nidal, Sylvance, and Solan. We got area damage, we got single target damage, and we got fire to be doubled. And the last team up setup I'll show is for Freeze. Now Freeze will like slow the enemy as well, or actually freeze them in solid. Now there are 3 pals here that will increase our freeze damage. I like Frost Alien because this will change your attack type to ice, inflict freeze 6, and increase your attack by 40%. Similar to Frost Alien Noct, who's great for dark. Obviously, this is great for ice teams. Now, earlier on, you have Beacon Chris, which will give you your attack type change to ice. This is also a good mount because for every ice team in your party, you get 25% increased movement speed, which is amazing. Iceland will also, when activated, so tossed out, change your attack type to ice and increase by 50%. But again, Frost Alien just ends up being the best in slot. Now, the only downside is freeze doesn't really have many counterplays or anything really that's unique about it like the other damage types. That's why I left it from last, because this is a bit more lame to build around than the others. But there is interesting interactions with new Elgrove Christ here when in the party, changes grants the player the ability to freeze enemies afflicted with soak in one strike, which is cool. But yeah, Frost doesn't really increase the damage dealt to anything. It's not like the Ivy covered or anything like that. Same thing with Dragon. There's no real big boost to Dragon. Like Chill It will change your attack type to Dragon, and then Blasphemous Ryu will improve the player and pile's Dragon type to enemy weak points by 40%. So Ice and Dragon are kind of lame to build around. If you really want to build around them, it's probably best to have like Frost and then throw in Dandelion, because Poison can stack with Freeze. So you can, funny enough, there's no Pokemon that are Ice and Poison types, but in Palworld, you can live with that dream with having Frost Alien, Dandelion inflicting poison, and then throwing on Prickster here. So oddly enough, this is a good freeze. You freeze them, they're taking damage over time. You're increasing the damage dealt with Prickster, you're increasing crit damage, and you're increasing your own player damage. So yeah, Frost or Ice damage can actually be pretty versatile, because you can also use any of the other pals that I mentioned. You can do an Ice Bow build and focus on Robinquill and Robinquill Terra instead of Dandelion and Prickster. You can even just throw on Gobfin, Ignis, and Gobfin, further increasing your damage while dealing the freezing and ice damage. You can also get some lifesteal with Lavender, although you can't have them at the same time. These have to be fighting together. You can go with shotguns, energy weapons, or full-on defense with ice, which is weird to think about. But yeah, it's weird. I think that ice setups actually benefit from having a bit of poison in them, just because, again, these can stack. So that is the top 5 best player damage builds in Palworld. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave those in the comments. I do a bunch of other Palworld content, so consider subscribing if you found this video fun or useful, and I hope you all have a great day.